Right then, as well as talking about employment all week and jobs here in London, we've also been talking about open house, which is one of the big cultural events in this city. But obviously, the culture of this city in all of its myriad forms, the main reason I think most of us live here is the culture in this city. Certainly for me, has never been under threat like it is now because of COVID that has closed theatres and stopped jazz concerts and stopped rock gigs and festivals and means I can't go and watch Queen's Park Rangers on a Saturday night or the cricket on an afternoon, which means that the opera house is quiet, which means that there isn't dancing and singing and all of the things that for me at least make life fantastic in this great city of ours. How do we try and kind of preserve our culture? And it's cultural spaces at risk is one of the strands and the ideas that they're looking at in Open House this weekend. And I'm going to discuss that with Jayden Ali, who teaches architecture at Central St Martin's. Hello, Jayden.
Hi, Robert.
And to you too, sir. First of all, this kind of idea that our cultural spaces are at risk, do you think we're exaggerating that here? Will it all be fine in a few months' time?
No, I think it's perilous. If I'm honest, I mean, if you think, I mean, I loved all of the examples you gave, but if you think about nightclubs,
Yeah.
for example, I mean, how are they to survive in a moment like now? And I think they were already under threat and at risk prior to COVID-19. I think this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
The night in particular is what cities are good at, isn't it? I mean, the countryside is dark at night and you go to bed. Cities come alive at night, but they can't at the moment.
Yeah, and you know that's the space outside of work. You know where open house has been so great in the past, and obviously open house operates during the day. Is that people throw open their front doors,
Yeah.
and invite people into their homes or their workplace, and that happens during the day. But you know, outside of our work lives, we explore the city in the evenings. And that's where culture really exists. And I just think it's going to be a struggle. And I think we need to invest in these spaces. And I think the festival this year does that quite well and foregrounds that as a conversation that needs to take place in the city.
Is it partly, you mentioned spaces, and isn't it partly at least allowing space for these things to occur? I mean, I grew up, in a London in the 1970s that had lots of space. It had disused factories and buildings, and every single one of them got turned into a rave or a nightclub or an exhibition space or a something. But we've had a London where I described it in my book as like a colouring book where all the pages have been coloured in. There's no space for that sort of underground or gutter snipe culture to arise.
Yeah, I think there's internal space is limited.
Yeah.
Inside space is limited, and I suppose they're the cultural institutions that you named. But I think a big progression for this year, and where we've tried to see opportunity in the crisis, is to look at the city on a whole and look at the spaces, as you mentioned, between buildings. Look at the landscape, and for me, from a personal perspective, it's these forms of culture that have the capacity to really shape a city's spirit.
Yeah.
Like what does it mean to be a Londoner, to live in London, to change our attitudes, our trends and our norms, and in that way to host new stories, advocate new agendas. And hopefully there is, I mean, I think there's a lot going on in this year's festival to do that. There's a number of cycling tours, a number of walking tours. It's really a moment for people to connect with their locality again and to find those spaces that we can access. And hopefully there's opportunity in that. I mean, that's the resilience of us as a set of people, I would say, and as a community.
And I think if there has been any positives to come out of this period of time, it's been the fact that lots of people, I mean, I know I did it, and I certainly wasn't the only one. When we were on proper lockdown and all you could do was go out for, one bit of exercise a day, what my wife and I did was we explored. And, the radius that 1 hour could take us from my house in Camden Town, I explored every nook and cranny of it, literally. Every back alley, every tiny bit of St Pancras or Camden or Archway. Or, do you know what I mean? And exploring those spaces, I think was something lots of people have done.
Yeah, there was a great moment during lockdown where I walked back to where I used to live as a child. and just walked around. It took an hour. It took 45 minutes to get there and walk around in that space and then cycle back. And I think that's what we're doing this year. We're championing the local buildings and the parts of the city that provide the backdrop to all of these amazing local stories and histories, and local people. I think there's one thing that might come out of this year, which I hope is that people form a more enduring connection to the place that they call home.
Yeah.
And support these networks of community and care that have provided so much and have been so critical at this time.
I think you're absolutely correct. But I do think there's two sort of halves of the equation. Because London is such a big, sprawling, diverse city, there's the places where people live, whether that be Tottenham or Crystal Palace or, wherever it might be, Haringey or Hounslow or anywhere. But then we've also, and those are yours, and those are your community and your spaces. There's also the collective spaces that we share, which I've always thought of as Soho and the River and Covent Garden and the West End. Do you know what I mean? And those are really suffering.
Yeah, I mean, but also, there's something about the River. And that's one of my favourite places also, and I no doubt other people's too. But that's a space in the city that is constantly open in some ways. I mean, there is means for you to explore those spaces during open house. I think some big institutions, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, might be supported. But really, there are support packages for that. It's more we have to support the smaller venues in a slightly more subtle way. So there's lots of things going on. I know you've had some people come on and speak about the alternative guide to the boroughs, and that's very much will allow people to explore their locality. But also, we've got cycling tours. If you're on a bike, if you've bought a bike during lockdown, then do get out and explore another part of the city, because it's all quite rich.
It certainly is, and I think that is absolutely true. The other day, my wife and I found ourselves almost by accident in a bit of London, not that far from where we live, probably 3 or 4 miles, and we said, we've never been here before, and we literally parked up the car and spent 45 minutes just walking around it, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. Where did I go recently? Eastern Temple, I think, and the doors were shut. And I had to peer through the gates. And it was a pilgrimage just to get there. It wasn't just about the destination. It wasn't just about arrival. It was about enjoying that as a journey. I suppose, there's tours around places like Hackney Wick, which I think where there's lots of kind of emerging culture that's at risk. There's also ways to explore some of these spaces online this year, which we're responding to the times, and I think it would be incongruous for us to have a festival which ran normally, and so a lot of stuff is online. So maybe there's scope for people to scope out places of interest and make a pilgrimage there. I mean, that's all part of discovering a city. There is a journey in that, which is not just a physical journey, which is one where you can explore from the comfort of your home, and then hopefully you can make it there.
It is very important, because I've read lots of pieces saying, London is under threat and people are leaving and businesses won't be coming back and all of that sort of stuff. It's very important that those of us who love our city, and I'm from here, I love it as much as anybody, that we kind of express that, isn't it? That do you know what I mean? That it becomes a communal process, if you like.
Yeah, and I think that sentiment is bound up in our culture. So that predominant mood of eclecticism and responsibility and endurance and charisma exists in all of our kind of cultural works, if that's a term, in all of our dance, in all of our song, in all of our sport, in all of our fashion. And I don't think we're easily moved to panic in some ways as a set of Londoners. We've got to look on the bright side, and as we're doing with the festival, trying to see opportunities in this moment, but also for as people to explore that as a cultural offering, and to take cues from what our culture offers as to our spirit, if you like.
Jayden, it's been fascinating to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
And we were talking to you because of Cultural Spaces at Risk, which is one of the strands that you can find out more about online at Open House. It's 12:30, time for the news headlines.